good evening, good morning for everybody. It's nice to have an opportunity to talking about the progress and problem of the base loading and base loading GSSP. And the picture is the type section for the base of the loading stage. For the loading stage, and Bruce Wadler sit on the section and point to the GSSP point there. You know, there's two traditional Permian system in the last century. The Russian were divided the upper Permian and the lower Permian by the base of the Euphemian, which actually the upper Permian include the current Guadalupe and the Lobingian, and then the lower Permian is called the Ciceralian. On the other hand, there's another twofold system, Permian system, we call the Chinese Permian system. They actually divided in the Chinese Upper Permian, which is basically equivalent to the Lobingian, and the Chinese Lower Permian started from the Congolian. It is called Qixia, and then the Guadalupian is called Kufengjin. Okay, actually Kufengjin is basically equivalent. It's Kufengjin and Malcoan is basically equivalent to the Guadalupian. And so we have two traditional upper Permian and two traditional lower Permian, but they are very different in terms of Chinese meaning and the Russian meaning. So in in the end of last century, the Permian Subcommission leaders, they actually reached a compromise that they said the Permian system should be divided into threefold. And the lower part is called Ciceralian, the middle part is Guadalupian, and the upper part is called Lobingian. So when we use the upper Permian, actually we don't know we mean which upper Permian, the Chinese one or the Russian one. So the Permian Subcommission lately suggests that we use the Ciceralian, Guadalupian, and Lobingian. They are actually the middle, the lower, middle, and upper Permian. I guess our former subcommission leaders, they reached a compromise that the Ciceralian should be represented by the system, the Ciceralian series in southern Europe, and that the Guadalupian series is represented by the Guadalupian series in western Texas, and the upper Permian is called Lobingian, represented by the sequences in South China. So that's the past history. The three GSSPs of the Guadalupian series was proposed in 1999 in a paper published on Permafile and led by Glenist, and they proposed three different conodon species, which is called Nankingensis, represented the base of the loading, and then the Gymnogonella acerata is represent the base of the loading, and then Postserata for the base of the captaining. They also designated three type sections, and the base loading was designated at the stratotype canyon section, and the wording base GSSP was designated at the gateway ledge section, and then the captaining base section GSSP was designated at the nipple hill. And in the former time, in last century, the conodon specialists thought that a very distinct collect, which is called serration, like the arrow point, there are some ripples here. The occurrences of this kind of morphological collectors was regarded as the beginning of the Guadalupe. That's the tradition. Okay, the three GSSPs, they're all in the Guadalupe National Park. And here is the stratotype canyon, and here is the Rodin, the Gateway Ledge section, and here is the Capitanian Base, the Nipple Hill section. They are very close. They are all in the Guadalupe Mountain National Park. And this is the, let's talking about the loading GSSP section first. And this is some picture of the section. Here is the entries of the stratotype section, the canyon section. And the limestone belongs to the Bone Spring Formation. And then behind that section is the Brush Canyon Formation. And the top part, this is the Capitanian Limestone. And here is the boundary between the Bone Spring Formation and the Cut-Off Formation, which is based by the Shumard member. The marker is a breccia bed here. And then there are three members. One is called Shumard member in the base of the Cut-Off Formation, and then overlaid by the El Centro member, and then followed by the Williams Ranch member. This is the section. And the GSSP was defined in the middle upper part of the El Centro member. Here is the yellow. If you look at the outcrop, the section is excellent. All the limestones are very well exposed and well bedded. So it looks like a very good section here. And then since the 3GSSP were defined in the 1990 paper and then were formally ratified by IUGS in 2001, so in 2013, and Charles, Lance, and I, we visited these three sections and put the golden mark on the GSSP point. And here is the GSSP for the base of the loading. That's the point. So we all believe that this is a very good section, and the point is very clear. And there is very distinct is aluminum tag here, and the Bruce actually in the early time point that's exactly the same tag. This is Bruce water samples W92 -8, and then after we put the golden mark on the GSSP, then Charles, Lance, and I, we collected a detailed set of the conodon sample from that section. And then we processed this. Look, this is the stratigraphic column with all the conodon sample here. And then we processed those samples. And Charles processed his samples, and we processed samples in Nanjing. And then surprised, we found something very interesting, or we never thought such kind of things we have found. And actually in the GSSP samples, we didn't find typical like Jindagonella nankinensis. And then the morphological collected Celartian, the Jindagonella genus, that's the characteristic of that genus. And we found some specimen with some weak Celartian here. Look, that's the specimen at the horizon 100 meters below the GSSP. So if we want to use the Celartian to define the base of the Guadalupe series, then it's not possible because it's 100 meters below here. And then in the GSSP sample, we didn't find a typical Jindagonella nankinensis. And slightly above in the black shell member, and then like there are some carbonate nodules in the shell, and then we found some conodons with distinct morphology of the Jindagonella nankinensis. So if we want to use Nankinensis to define the GSSP at the stereotype section, and then we have to define with this sample or a sample in the base of the Williams range member with the typical Nankinensis. But this is a nodule; it's not a stable bed, so that will be difficult to be used for a horizon to define the GSSP. So probably we want to choose some sample here with typical Nankinensis. But that's the problem we have recognized. And then if we look at the series, the conodont we find from the section, and this is lower and then going up, okay, and then this is younger, and then we find the serrated Gymnogonella specimen we can find in the quite lower part of the below the GSSP, okay, and then typical Gymnogonella population we find from the sample SC22. That's the nodule, carbonated nodule in the black shell, and there are some specimens with like weak serrations here. We don't know how to deal with such kind of specimen. Shall we like name this specimen with weak serration as a new species or as the transitional forms between Gymnogonella nankinensis and Acellata or not? And then Fusarinis, we found also some Fusarinis from the stereotype section. But these Fusarinis are all endemic. It is very difficult to correlate with the Fusarinis in the Texas Ocean. So it's basically not very useful to use Fusarinis for correlation. We also analyzed the very high resolution geochemical data for the carbon isotope, and then we find there's about like 2 per mil negative shift here, and then at the GSSP level, Bruce's GSSP level, above that there is a very distinct negative shift here, but that negative shift has not been found in anywhere else there. So that's the we interpreted it as the probably oxidization of the black shell, the organic material from the black shell, to make that negative excursion. So it's not useful for global correlation. So now the problem for the base loading GSSP, the morphology character serration cannot be used as the marker for the base of the Guadalupe series. And the fed sample does not contain typical Gymnogonella nankinensis. The samples yielding the typical Gymnogonella nankinensis are from the carbonate nodule in the shell and above. So the GSSP needs to be redefined, probably moved to a horizon in the Williams range member. And then the problem is there's no other correlation markers like ash beds, geochemical signals, they're all not available. So Charles may later slide introduce the sequence stratigraphy may provide some potential correlation. So this we should listen to Charles' talk after my talk. Okay, then let's look at the base of the Guadalupe in South China slightly. And then you know that the base of the Guadalupe series was defined by the index species Gymnogonella nankinensis. It's very interesting. That species actually was, the type locality is from Zhenpan section near Nanjing. If you come to Nanjing, it's very easy to go there, okay? And then near the first occurrences of the Gymnogonella nankinensis, there's 2 distinct ash beds here. We dated these 2 ash beds between the Qixia Formation and the Gufeng Formation, and then we got a very good high precision uranium rate age, which is 273.14. That is currently used for the base of the Guadalupe, the absolute age. This is actually from Zhengpanshan near Nanjing, not from North America. And the section actually contains quite abundant fossils, including conodonts, ammonoids, brachiopods, radioredding, and they're very abundant. So the section is very well recognized. And then recently, from the section, we find some serrated gymnogondanella-like specimen from the topmost part of the Chisha Formation. Not so that means the base of the Guadalupe series in South China is not exactly at the base of the Kufeng Formation if we want to use the Selashin as the base of the Guadalupe. And then the upper part of the Chisha Formation contains typical like late congruing conodonts like Suetognathus subsymmetricus and Pseudosugitonathus crustatus or something like that. And then there's another section which is exactly correlatable with the Zhengpanshan section near Nanjing. It's in the Pingdingshan East section in Chaohu, Anhui province. This is about 131 kilometers southwest to Nanjing. But the lithofacies of the Kufeng Formation is exactly same as that at the Nanjing Zhengpanshan section. And we also date the ash beds between the Qixia and the Kufeng Formation, which is about 272.95 MA. That is exactly same as that dated at the Zhengpanshan near Nanjing, if we consider the uncertainty. And we also find some serrated specimen from the topmost part of the Qixia Formation at the Pingdingshan East, and then typical congruing conodonts here, and then typical gymnogondanella in the Kufeng Formation from that section. And then recently, that unpublished data, we found another new section, which is called the Maweishan section, also in Chaohu, Anhui province, 11 kilometers south to the Pingdingshan East section. And then we find from the topmost part of the limestone of the Qixia Formation, find abundant gymnogondanella nankinensis. And that is also the overlain by the siliceous rock and the black shale of the Kufeng Formation. And then here is the lithological boundary between the Kufeng Formation and the Qixia Formation. And there's an ash bed along the dashed line, and then this has been dated in Nanjing and in Pingdingshan. And also abundant ammonoid fossils were found from the base part of the Kufeng Formation. And this is a picture showing the typical Kufeng Formation with a very well dated and cherry chirts and black shell. Okay. And then we found this is the gymnogondanella nankinensis from the topmost part of the Qixia Formation. It's quite typical for the gymnogondanella nankinensis population. So gymnogondanella nankinensis began to occur in the topmost part of the Qixia Formation, so slightly below the former base of the Guadalupe series in South China, as at like Zhengpanshan or something. And then there's very abundant ammonoids from the Kufeng Formation, and that ammonoids bed can be found in all the three sections in Southeast China, including Pingdingshan, Zhengpanshan, and Maweishan. Okay, and this is the interpretation for the sequence stratigraphy. Charles may later talking about that. It's really difficult for other people to recognize such kind of sequences, but That's the interpretation from Chen Feng. And then I had a discussion with Charles before, but Charles may explain this in more detail. And then if we look at the three sections in Southeast China, we have the Kufeng Formation, the Chert and the Black Shale, and then the dark limestone Qixia Formation here. And there's quite a few well-dated ash beds here. So we have a very good geochronological control for the base of the Guadalupe. And the Conodon, the Ginogananensis begin to occur in the topmost part of the Qixia Formation in all three sections. But it's not too many meters below. It's only about like 1 to 5 meters in Shaoxian. So, but the problem is in the North America, in the stratotype canyon, the North America section, we don't have any other markers except for the serrated conodons. And even the serrated specimen from the stratotype canyon section, it's really hard to separate the Ginogandelera from the underlying transitional forms, weakly serrated specimen. That's so if we want to define the base of the loading at the stratotype section, stratotype canyon section, and then Lance, Charles, and us, we need to solve the taxonomic problem for the serrated specimen, even 100 meters below the GSSP. So that's so now let's see the base of the wording section. And this is a picture from Charles's the GTS and 2012. And here is the picture to show the GSSP for the base of the wording. Okay. And then it is marked by the Ginogandelera acellata begin to occur from here. And in 2013, and then Charles, Lance, and I, we find that exactly the same rock in the same picture show in this. This is the same picture, okay? So the GSSP is here, then we put a golden mark on here. And again, the section, the GSSP was placed in a very short limestone unit. It's called a gateway member. Okay, it's about 10 meter here, and then above is the shell, and then overlaid by conglomerates, and then below is the Cherry Canyon sandstone without any marine fossil, and here is the GSSP. And then when we process the samples, Charles and both labs, we process the samples. When we didn't find any conodons from this fed sample, and we only found like sponge spicules from the sample, and then no conodons. We actually collect the samples along this bed in quite a few different sections. Look, this is a GW section, GWB section, and then we didn't find the conodons from this bed. And later, actually, Lance provided some additional information to us that he said Bruce Water's original section was here in the just near some tower here, and then that land has already become a private land. And this is the US 62-108 highway. It's the border between the national park and the private land. So the section is in the private land, and Bruce Water actually move the section, the GSSP section here, based on the lithological correlation between here and here. But no conodons found. So that's the problem. And then if you look at the gateway member, this is the base of the limestone unit. We collect the sample from the base of the limestone unit, and quite a few very detailed conodon sample. We find still find the Gymnogamleda acellata, very, very abundant specimen we have found from here. And this is the population show from the 101.5 sample. And then below that, it's the Cherry Canyon sandstone without any conodonts and even other fossils. So we didn't find anything. It's a sandstone. So based on this gateway section, we don't know where is the fed of the Gymnogamleda acellata, the index species of the wording stage. And then there are some other potential sections in the Guadalupe National Park. And Lance actually suggests that the Patterson Hill section is a good section. We also worked on the Patterson Hill section, collected quite detailed conodont samples, and we still find Gymnogamleda acellata at the base of the limestone unit, and then below that is the sandstone, so no fossil found. So even based on the Patterson Hill section, we don't know where is the beginning of the index species Gymnogamleda acellata, and that's from the Patterson Hill. In order to confirm Bruce Woodall's original record, actually, Lance and Junina, they apply for permission, went into the private land to collect a set of conodont samples from Bruce Woodall's original section, and those samples were processed in Nanjing, and we only found some very fragmentary conodonts from the section. So all those information indicate it is difficult to define the base of the wording to use those sections in the Guadalupe National Park. We haven't found any good section yet. So that's the problem for wording. And also we try very hard to collect all the ash beds just below the gateway member, the limestone unit. In the Cherry Canyon sandstone, we found about like 10 different ash beds. Those are two pictures to show the ash beds, and try to date those ash beds. If these ash beds can be dated, then that will provide a very important calibration for the base of the wording. Unfortunately, we didn't find any ash beds, any datable ash beds from the Cherry Canyon sandstone. So the problem of the base wording GSSP, the fed samples do not contain conodonts, and Bruce Woodall's original section, now in the private land, does not contain abundant conodonts. The index species Gymnogamleda acellata is abundant in the base of the gateway member, which is endlined by the non-phosphorus Cherry Canyon sandstone. So the real fed of the index species is unknown. No datable ash beds are available from the Cherry Canyon sandstone. No other correlation marker is available. Chemostratigraphy is not doable because the gateway limestone member is short and evaporitic. Gymnogamleda nankiensis began to occur in the topmost part of the Qixia Formation in South China. Oh, this is for the loading. I'm sorry. I just ate it. Let's look at the section in South China with the potential for the base of the wording, but certainly welcome any comments for that. And here is the Penglaitan section, the yellow arrow point the base of the Lobingin GSFC, which was just redefined. So this is the base of the Lobingin series. And here is the base wording interval, okay? And since this part is higher, so it's not flooded, even the water level is high at this section. And here is more outcrops about the Maokou Formation here. And then here is close to the Qixia Formation. And we have collected a very, very detailed conodont sample from that section. And we find that Gymnogonella acetata began to occur in, it's about here, about 142 meter here. And then the section contains also very abundant like Gymnogonella postcellata and Gymnogonella nankinensis. And the conodont zones can be very clearly recognized in that section. And here is some of the conodonts of the Gymnogonella acellata, and then some transitional form or nankinensis and acellata or something. And in another section, central China, which called the Zheng'an Xikou section, central China, we find some ash beds there in the section. It's 2 ash beds here, very close to within the Gymnogonella acellata zone, very close to the base of the wording or even the wording loading boundary interval. And those 2 ash beds have been well dated with the very precise dates here. And then if you look at the conodont, this is typical the Gymnogonella nankinensis, and this is something the Gymnogonella acellata from that section. So my talk, just my conclusion is based on our progress on the 2 GSSPs in the Guadalupe, and then both base loading and base wording GSSP need to be redefined. So that's the acknowledgement. We actually went to the Guadalupe National Park to collect a large set of conodont sample and many other samples 3 times in 2013, 2015, 2017. I would particularly appreciate Spencer Locus. Every time he just shipped all the samples to Nanjing without our help. He just did it. This is very helpful to get examples. Okay, so that's my talk. I leave for Charles. Okay, Charles, continue, please. Charles?
Just 1 second.
Okay, so I thought you can't hear us. Oh, nice.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Well, I thought we were going to do this in a couple of different segments, but thanks, Shuzhong. Shuzhong and I, there's a picture of us in Lille, France, at the Strati meeting this year, and we've been working together for over 20 years now, and that collaborative relationship has been very special and continues to be. I mean, I really want to acknowledge all of the leadership by Shuzhong in collecting and recollecting all of these sites. He was the one that really spearheaded this, and his grants from the Chinese government certainly helped on that front too. I'm going to take a slightly different tactic to the 2 levels. I feel like Shuzhong is being just a little bit too negative about the 2 things, and I'm going to talk about what I consider to be the even more positive aspects of each of these locations. I'm going to talk about conodonts too. I'm sorry if anybody thought that I wasn't going to talk about conodonts, then they obviously don't know me. But I am going to try to put together the beginnings of what is supposed to be a chronostratigraphic or Wheeler diagram for this work. So I've used this to prepare this talk as an opportunity to get that this Wheeler diagram going. And okay, I just want to put a couple of comments out about putting GSSPs into perspective. The point, as we all know, but we seem to forget from time to time, point is defined in one section. There's usually a marker like a species first appearance datum that is used as a marker, but it's defined in a point is defined in one section. When we have decided on that, we're then going to collect as many other stratigraphic markers as possible at that section to aid correlation to other areas. The point itself is precise and by definition accurate at only one locality in the world. Everywhere else, we're trying to correlate by using as many different tools as we have available to us. You know, and this has been coming up more and more lately. We heard it from Brad Kramer at the Strati meeting. I had discussions about this with Mark Schmitz last week at the GSA meeting. We have to consider uncertainty in a much greater extent than we have before in our biostratigraphic work. Everything else we do in geoscience has a degree of uncertainty. So why should we not expect the correlation of a GSSP to not have some uncertainty? Why would we expect correlation around the world to be absolutely precise? Geochronology, we use these dates, and this is an amazing tool now that we're finding more and more of these ash beds and successions. And it's really proving to be a testing ground because in many cases, the biostratigraphic work was done. And now we're getting the dates, and in many cases, it supports the biostrat. In other cases, it's challenged the biostrat. And this can only lead to better science. But geochronology always has an uncertainty. And a lot of the age dates that you saw in Shuzhong's talk are basically plus or minus 100 to 150,000 years. So what would be a reasonable level for correlation accuracy? That's, I don't know how to figure that out, but I'm just going to say, just going to pick a number in here that it might be sort of plus or minus 250,000 years. So in other words, we really are trying to correlate within a window of about 500,000 years. Maybe that's less, maybe that's more. I think we should think about that. The Guadalupean stages have all been defined by a variety of species of Ginogonduella. And here we see a Ginogonduella nankingensis in here, and Shuzhong pointed out the serrations in here. And actually, the GSSP for the base of the Rhodian isn't the first serrations. We thought it might be, but really it's the first appearance datum of Ginogonduella nankingensis. And Ginogonduella nankingensis, the genus Ginogonduella, has a character in the apparatus that is not present in the ancestor Mesogonduella species. So there are other characters that we need to consider when we're looking at, have we got Ginogonduella? So the fact that there are serrated forms, but these are much more subtly serrated forms lower in the section at the stratotype canyon is really not an issue. In fact, I would say it's a positive, because now we're not looking at just this sudden first appearance of serration, but we're looking at a much stronger evolutionary event. We do need to define that species, and so the clonodont workers do have some a little bit of taxonomy to do in here, but nothing needs to change in terms of the definition. It can still be the first appearance datum of Genogondwella and Nanking. It's not definition, but that's our marker to pick the level at Stratotype Canyon, for example. Well, most of the work has been done in West Texas and in South China, and when you're looking at that whole Genogondwella lineage, that's where you see it. You see it in what May and I in 2001 called the Equatorial Warm Water Province. When you go to the north, for example, into the Phosphoria Basin, or even further north, northwestern Pangaea into the Sverdrup Basin in the Canadian Arctic, where I did my master's and PhD and subsequent a lot of subsequent research, things are a little bit different. In fact, there's only a couple of samples where we see serrated forms. Very fortunate that they're there, because it really does provide a really nice correlation for the base of the Rhodian. Shuzhong has already showed you the locations in the Guadalupe Mountains National Park and a number of localities within China. Well, here's some amazing outcrop here in the Guadalupe Mountains, and you know, this is this location, this whole park in here is going to become one of the World Geological World Heritage Sites. We saw the first 100 come out there recently, and I know that Charlie Cairns and Lance Lambert have produced the proposal for this whole region. This is a very special geological site, and we should not lose track of that. The park is going to make this site, these various sites available to us, and the access is exceptional. Look, they've even built staircases right up to the GSSP level here in at Stratotype Canyon. And the other thing to remember is this is probably, there's been more sequence stratigraphy done on the rocks in Guadalupe National Park than anywhere else in the world. And the sequence stratigraphic research that is done here is absolutely exceptional. And Charlie Cairns has sort of led all of that kind of work in here, but many other authors with him. These are a couple of figures from the 2014 paper. And I just want to point, this is a LiDAR of one of the escarpments, and here's the cutoff formation right in here. That's the cutoff formation right here, and the GSSP that we have currently selected is within the El Centro member of the, and Shuzhong has pointed that out. Basically, the stratigraphy of the Shumard is equivalent to the high-frequency sequences. Charlie Cairns has named a whole bunch of high-frequency sequences, and L7, L8 here they're shown as being correlative with the lower San Andres formation, and elsewhere we would correlate this with the Shumard formation. This is a low stand to initial transgressive systems tract succession, and then when we move into the El Centro member, we're definitely into a transgressive system tract. There's a nice ramp-like character to the succession in this area. The succession of reefs that we see really start a little bit later, and it's within this ramp that we have selected the boundary in here. We could argue where the maximum flooding surface in here, but this is certainly a maximum flooding interval, if you like. And then there's a major low stand right after that, and that incises into the shelf succession and fills this with the Brushy Canyon sandstone, which is initial low stand, and then we see on lap of that and then we have the Cherry Canyon succession. So there is another sequence in here above the Rhodian sequence. We have a major transgressive systems tract there, and then that's cut out during the low stand, the upper parts of that. Another cycle in here, and this is probably more of a tectonic cycle. I don't know for sure. The base of the late Kungurian, early Rhodian transgression is certainly global. And then there's another sequence that develops above that, and that's where we see the Getaway tongue and other units, the South Wells and Manzanita and so on. So I won't. We'll come back to that a little bit with the Wordian. Okay, now, so all we have to do is just bouncing around in here, but maybe we have to move the boundary just a little bit higher. There's a number of nodules in there. Yes, there is. There's not just one, and those nodules have grown in place. If they're in the nodules, then they're in the shale. It's just the shale is a little harder to process. Okay, well, I'd like to talk then about, there is a transgressive systems tract, and there's another place in the world that most of you have, in fact, probably all of you have never seen. And this is the section that I studied in my master's thesis, which takes me way back to 1981, I'm afraid to admit. But we have a major sequence boundary in here. These are quartzo sandstones right here, basically terrestrial and upper shore phase sandstones at the very top in here. But we have major transgression here. This is the Assistance Formation. And I discovered these serrated forms in a few samples right in this area right in here. And then everything else above that are smooth mesogonduella forms. That's another problem. But we have, within this transgressive systems tract, we have the serrated forms present there as well. And you can see there's a striking similarity, but it's not exactly the same. And so we've developed this concept called geographic fines. And this is so initially in the sort of upper parts of the Kungurian, this diagram is trying to show that there's a lot of gene flow. The conodont successions are comparable in many parts of the world, but we're all aware that in the Guadalupean, we have significant level of provincialism developed. And so this figure is trying to suggest, well, that this gene flow is being pinched off by climatic changes, and oceanographic changes, and that we have serrated forms like Ginogonduella nankingensis in West Texas. In the Phosphoria Basin, we see some things that are comparable but different. And one thing I want to point out, it's not this pointed, sharp narrowing and pointed form. There's more of this more gradual narrowing and rounded form, which is very comparable to the species that I have up in Sergipe Basin. And Bruce Wardlaw in 2015 referred to this Ginogonduella nankingensis bankeni. We also have some very characteristic forms that called gracilis. There's a really good correlation across this area, and we can use the concept of a geographic fine to do that. Well, I would like to suggest that we can correlate that Arctic succession. These are the samples right in here, C49 to or F49 to F54 that had the serrated conodonts down in here. And we have serrated forms in the basal part of the Kufeng formation here, in Wu et al.'s paper 2017, and this is the Pingding Shan section, and Shuzhong also pointed out the Zhengpan Shan section that's very close to Nanjing, and it's very comparable in its overall character, and ash beds are present, at this section as well, Zhongpanshan, and are virtually the same age. We're certainly within uncertainty. So we have transgressive systems tract, Ginnagonduella, at least subspecies of Ginnagonduella nankingensis at both of these sites. So that's a pretty good correlation from Arctic Canada in the boreal realm into South China. Now there's another place where this is a paper by Vladimir Davidov and others, including Mark Schmitz, for example, that they did some beautiful geochronology, and in the section they had an ammonoid species called Sphaerogyropides harkeri. Now you don't find this Sphaerogyropides harkeri in South China, but you do find it in the lower part of the Assistance Formation in the Canadian Arctic. In fact, Sphaerogyropides harkeri and Ginnagonduella nankingensis subspecies are all occur in the lower part of the Assistance Formation. And so we have a good correlation between these two sites. We have harkeri with subspecies of nankingensis, and we have Sphaerogyropides harkeri in northeastern Russia. And the dates that they have right there, 274 plus or minus 0.1. So when you look at a section of these sort of types, when you draw them up in here, it kind of gives you a false impression that the record is complete. But there's always unconformities. And that's where trying to build a chronostratigraphic diagram plays into it. So here's the beginnings of my chronostratigraphic figure in here. Now, currently, and we could argue this, the Kungurian-Rhodian boundary in the GTS 2020 is correlated as 274.37. And that comes largely from these samples in here in northeastern Russia. When Felix Gradstein asked me, what do we do with that 274 date? And I said, it's a good date. And we do have we have important conodonts and that same ammonoid in the Canadian Arctic. So I said, we should place those just a little bit, that they would indicate that the Kungurian-Rhodian boundary would be just a little bit below that. And so the interpolation came out at 274.37. And so here's a 274. This is a chronostratigraphic diagram. We're looking for a timeline in here. And I've split up my sections. So I have the Assistance Formation, the Sabine Bay Formation down here, and a big gap in this. That's the unconformity. I pointed out an unconformity in here. I don't know that for sure, but I made it a lot less than the one here. And that's a question that should be asked of Vladimir Davidov. Okay, now I've added in the Pingding Shan section and split it up. It has to be an unconformity in there. And the 273, and they also have another age just a little bit higher in the section at 273.1, which is the same age within uncertainty as we've got here for this major transgression in here. So I don't think that this transgression actually dates the base of the Guadalupean. This transgression dates a significant transgression above, a major flooding surface above the Guadalupean, base Guadalupean. Okay. Of course, there's the Maui Shan section that Shuzhong just showed, and very interesting section. I haven't been to this location, but we've certainly talked about it on Zoom, and I think it's a very important section. So where do we put it into this chronostratigraphic figure? This is, Shuzhong was good enough to share his presentation with me on the weekend, and this is the only figure that I grabbed from his talk, but I've slightly modified it as it is. And there's a lot of Ginnagonduella nankingensis in Unit 4. It's all within 2.5 meters, as I understand, are the most abundant samples from this flooding surface. This is the big flooding surface, a slightly younger one in here. And then you can see that this unit is a very interesting unit. This is a unit that you can see that there's some major transgressions. Chuan Fun, who I've known for many years, I think we should sit down and just maybe put, I think you could move these boundaries just slightly in here, but and he's got a lot of jargon in his sequence stratigraphy. I like to keep it simpler than that, but nevertheless, there is a very distinct sequence or cycle at the top of the Qixia formation. So let's call this lower Qixia or middle Qixia, whatever you want to call it. This is the upper Qixia unit. And in my view, taking this same figure in here, there's the Pingdingshan section, 11 kilometers away from that, we have the Maoishan section, and we have a unit that's not present in this particular area in here. And this would correlate very nicely with the with probably the L central member in here. And so this is the beginnings of what I would call a chronostratigraphic figure. And just reminding myself here, the high frequency cycles that were described by Charlie Cairns in the Guadalupe Mountains, I've suggested these might be the Chuan Fun looked at all of these different units. Maybe we can call these L7, L8, G1, G2, and there's G3. And whoops, sorry. And here we see the same thing at this particular location in here, the L7 and L8 in the Shumard. There's G1, there's G2, and then G3. Not sure we can truly discern G4 in that column there. But I've tried to emphasize on this chronostratigraphic figure that this is what a correlation accuracy of plus or minus 250,000 years looks like. And so we would expect that if we're trying to make these correlations, that maybe that's the best we can do. This is the accuracy of the precision of a geochronologic sample. That's plus or minus 100,000. So that's 200,000 years. That's 500,000 years right there. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we do all of these correlations. So the problems for the Rhodian GSSP, and I'll do the Wordian much more quickly. We need to resolve some taxonomy. We need to resolve the sequence stratigraphy. I'm sure there's going to be some debates about what I just showed. So we need to get on a Zoom call, and we need to refine the point, but not a whole lot. It's a good site. It's a good location. The base Rhodian can be correlated across provinces. I showed you how we can go from the equatorial warm water province into the north cool water province. It's associated always with a transgressive unit. The base Rhodian can be correlated within the boreal realm. We have many geochronologic ages in South China and in the Guadalupe and in the boreal realm now with that work by Vladimir Davidov in northeastern Russia. And the peak of typical Genogonduela Nanking inches is about 273. So I think the forms that we're seeing at Pingdingshan and Zhengpanshan are probably that 273. And so the base Rhodian, 274. All correlations must have a level of uncertainty. We got to keep that in mind. I don't know how to do that well, but I think at least at this point we can say that. And finally, this boundary, as well as the overlying Wordian and Capitanian, are defined with the best studied sequence stratigraphic succession in the entire world. And there's what it looks like. I mean, that is amazing. And I don't have time to go through the definitions for all these. We've talked about the Rhodian, and I've mentioned about the incision by low stand at Brushy Canyon, and then the influx, the onlap of some of the upper Brushy Canyon and the Cherry Canyon, another cycle, and then we get to these getaway tongues right in here, this occurs within a transgressive unit as well, not nearly, in my view, as prominent as the transgressive unit that we see at the base of the Rhodian. But these are everything in here is like incredible correlations, and we need to keep that in mind. All right, A. serrata as a marker. Well, it was first recognized, it was named by Clark and Benken in 1979. It was Neogonduella A. serrata at that time, now Genogonduella. And this is the holotype right here. So the classic form looks like this little teardrop shaped form in here. These tend to be the smaller ones. So a good growth series probably includes these other morphotypes. These are all morphotypes that came out of the Clark and Benken's paper in here. And notice some of them have this deflection of the posterior cusp and this more different wedge-shaped posterior margin instead of this narrow margin in here. It's a very distinct species. And here's the work Dongxun Yuan and others, including myself and Lance Lambert, and we were convinced that okay, the brushy canyon, we have morphotype A and morphotype B, but I'm gonna say right now, morphotype A, it just simply is not. It is not within the morphotypes that Clark and Benken illustrated. This is not Genogonduella A. serrata. This form in here is a transitional form from Nanking-ensis. You can see the different shaped platform in here. And there's our holotype again. This is a totally different form. Now, morphotype B, okay, it's not abundant, but it's there. And in fact, here are some of the specimens that were illustrated by Yuan. Look at that. This is identical to the morphotype, to the holotype right in here. Just below, there's the GSSP level, which does not have any conodonts for sure. And then a little bit higher in here, here's two specimens identical to some of the other. And just a reminder, there's the holotype. There's one of the paratypes in Clark and Benken. And you can see that we have, going in that interval, we definitely have A. serrata. And so morphotype A, I think we've, Dongxun was correct to do this because Bruce Wardlaw had added a number of forms like this into the definition. Bruce Wardlaw changed the original definition of A. serrata. We probably don't need to do that. We should not do that. And I'll give you an idea why. All right, so I'm cognizant that we've taken a bit of time in here. So I just want to, we've talked about all the correlations between equatorial correlations. What about an area like Oman, where we have the Neotethys Sea Opediga, and there's a seamount that's, I'm just going to show one section that we've worked on there called Rustak. And so some sort of a basaltic edifice that has carbonate succession that has developed on top of that, a long distance from any terrestrial influx of sedimentation. So it's very condensed, all sat facies, and with lots of conodonts in it as well. And so we need to remember that Genogonduella is an equatorial warm water, and Mesogonduella is a cool water province, and that creates some problems. But basal rhodium, hey, that was solved. Here's Oman, and this is an area right on the boundary between our water masses, where I've shown these two different colors and sizes of a conodont animal to designate the Genogonduella and Mesogonduella populations. And I think there's an intermixing. In fact, when you look at the conodonts in Oman, you get mostly the cool water Mesogonduella, but then there's some of the serrated forms as well. So, but more sporadic occurrences. So there's an intermixing across this area here. So this area is located close to that boundary, and so we're going to take a look at Rustak right here. And there's the section. We have Adam Woods and Steve Grasby. Just saw both of these gentlemen at GSA last week. And there's the whole section. It's the whole section as measured here is just over 4 meters. I did a paper in 2003 with Shuzhong May, and I'm going to retract a large part of that paper. We suggested Upper Kungurian, but no, there's what we called a new species of Misogondowella. This is Genogondowella acerata. There's a classic form right here. So I've changed Rustakensis to acerata. And also, this is not Subsymmetricus. This is Sweetonathus Hanjongensis. So everything's here saying that these samples right in here are Werdian. So it seems that the Werdian is all over the place. In fact, just despite the fact that it hasn't been, we haven't done anything more since it was ratified, people have still been able to use it. Here's the original holotype and a paratype in the Southwest member from Clark and Benken, just above the getaway member that I showed some specimens from Dongshun's paper. Here's the Rustak ones right in here. There's some there's the ones that we illustrated. Here's some that Koser and Wardlaw in 2010 also illustrated. And in the Shiko section and Shanxi section province, this is a paper by Wu et al. 2021. Shuzhong showed some new work that they've done here as well. But they have both of these morphotypes there as well. In rocks that they correlated as the Werdian. No, doesn't seem to be a problem in correlating the Werdian in many parts of the world. Maybe a problem in some of the boreal realm. These are ones that Bruce Wardlaw 2015 called acerata in the Phosphoria Basin. There is some similarity, but very marked differences in the cusp. This could be a geographic find as well. I think that needs to be considered a little bit more. Lots of geochronology. Shuzhong has pointed out all of these, so I think that's all really good. So we need to move the GSSP, but maybe we actually need to move that GSP a little bit lower. The other possibility is to move it higher into the South Wells member. But by moving it a little bit lower, you're actually in the middle of this getaway limestone. So I think there's, to me, we can leave the GSSP at the same section, but just move it a little bit lower. Be a little bit more careful about how we define it. Get the taxonomy really clear. So we need to resolve the taxonomy. We need to accept that there's going to be uncertainty, and despite that uncertainty, people seem to have had no problem in correlating the Werdian around the world. We need to refine that point, and we need to vote because we are changing it a little bit. It's also been a transgressive unit, but not as pronounced as the Werdian. We can correlate it within the warm water province, equatorial warm water province, but also on the margins of the North cool water province and the Gondwana cool water province. We have geochronologic ages. That's different from the interpolation in the GTS 2020 of about 266.9. The peak of typical acerata is about 265.5. And finally, the Werdian is also defined in that best sequence stratigraphic succession in the world. So to me, the important thing here is that we need to honor the plan. The plan, as Shuzhong started his talk with Jin et al. 1997 in episodes. And here's the pictures of these 4 individuals in that paper in episodes of Jin Yugan, Bruce Wardlaw, Brian Gunnister, and Vilnina Kotler. They did an outstanding piece of work. Now, some people might call this politics, but I think it is an honorable course of action that they set in place to get the time scale defined. Maybe, definitely, Bruce was in too much of a hurry to get that the Rhodian, Meridian, Capitanian done. So the work that led by Shuzhong Chen has been essential to make these truly good chronostratigraphic subdivisions. Once we get this thing done, we can correlate to other regions into the terrestrial realm. And that's the end of my talk.